Do you ever feel like the books you love the most are not being talked about?
Yeah. Do you feel like the books that maybe you love are a little underappreciated?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Well, we have a couple of books each that we're going to talk about that we think are just lagging with the attention and the love.
Agreed. Shall I go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So my first up is Lock In by John Scalzi.
It's a great one.
Right? Phenomenal book. John Scalzi is a phenomenal author that writes predominantly kind of science fiction-esque books. And he has just such a fun, I guess, setting and thought process for all these. So Locked In is basically set in a world where people have experienced some sort of plague style thing, all right? Some sickness that has left a portion of the world, say 10%, what they call lock-in, where you are paralyzed. So you're basically a quadriplegic, and what has happened is people have invented ways for people who are quadriplegic because of this disease to be able to control robots with their mind. And so we follow in this book kind of a buddy cop drama where one of them happens to be one of these robots. And so they can do kind of crazy things, but they're still human. And every once in a while, you actually cut back to his kind of normal body and deal with the things that come there. But it just tells a really interesting story of it. The other kind of fascinating thing is the main character, who is this robot controlling person, happens to be a celebrity because he was kind of the first person to get this disease. Maybe not the first person, but highly publicized, and his father was famous and different things around it. So it adds interestingness to it. Just a really fun book, and one that I don't hear people talk about it all that often.
Not at all.
I know people talk about John Scalzi, but I just don't hear this one particularly being mentioned. And it's phenomenal. There's even a pretty good sequel called Head On.
I liked the sequel a lot.
That came out with it as well. I would definitely recommend picking it up and giving it a read.
Both of them. Really, really, really good.
Really good.
All right. This one is not a 5-star perfect book, but I really enjoyed it. It's The Firekeeper's Daughter.
Okay.
It takes place, I want to say, in Michigan. It's a young adult novel, and main character, there's like hockey and drugs, and there's a murder, and there's mystery, and there's a little bit of violence. Not a lot of, I wouldn't call it a thriller. Very memorable moments in here, though, and it's like a lot of like family. It takes place on a what's it called? It's like a Ojibwe. Ojibwe? Is that how you say that? A reservation up there?
No idea.
Ojibwe. I wish I knew if I was saying that right. Anyway, so it's like you get the Indian culture, you get like different pieces that you just don't usually see, especially in young adult novels. And it's just told in a really easy to read story. So I did give it 4 stars because I do feel like one of the storylines just kind of dropped a little. But other than that, really good book. And I do recommend reading it.
So interesting. I don't know if I've ever heard of this book. So obviously it's kind of being underappreciated in that regard.
I think I heard it might be turning into a Netflix something.
Okay.
So maybe
all right.
Maybe
it is
maybe
interesting.
it's more popular than I think.
That used to be a mark of popularity, but now there's so many, particularly fantasy young adult things, turning into the TV series and movies that it almost just feels like that's what they call table stakes, right? Like that's just, you expect that from books.
Well, in some you're like, oh wait, that's a TV series. I've never heard of that as a TV series. I've only ever heard of it as a book. Like, The Last Thing He Told Me, I had no clue that was a TV show, but that book's been on my radar for a while. Like, you just don't hear about it. It's not as big of a deal if it gets put into movie form or TV form.
I've never heard of it either.
Huh. Well, that's good. I'd recommend it.
Great. All right. The next one I'm going to go with, and I have not finished the series, so if it ends up being awful, and that's why people don't talk about it, then fine. But this is the, I was going to say Blinding Knife, the second book. This is The Black Prism. It's the first in the Lightbringer series. There's, I think, 5 of these books. I've loved it. I thought it was phenomenal writing. I really, really like the characters. I think it's really interesting. Has an interesting twist on kind of the chosen one trope, and just really fun world where the magic system is interesting, and the characters are compelling. And I'm not really sure who the bad guys completely are, but I know who the good guy is. At least one of them. Anyway, so it's a fun book series that I'm not sure why it's not talked about more with, like Robert Jordan's stuff or Brandon Sanderson's stuff or Robin Hobb's stuff. That kind of larger epic fantasy, because it definitely fills there. And I know Brent Weeks has other books that are very popular, I just haven't heard a ton about the Lightbringer series, and I've really, really enjoyed it. So I think it's underappreciated, even though I do know this is appreciated by a lot of people. I just don't think it's quite got the hype that others have. And again, a good example, I think this would make an excellent, excellent TV series or movie there, with some really fun characters I think people would really enjoy seeing portrayed. And I think almost everyone would like this book.
That's cool.
So, great book.
You might disagree with me on this one.
Okay.
I think it could use a little more love and appreciation. This is Brandon Sanderson's Skyward.
Okay.
His YA. Okay, I should say not his. It's one of his YA series. It's the first of, I think there'll be 4 total. The 4th one comes out at the end of the year. So, it is really good. It's really cute. You follow what's her name? Spencer.
Mm-hmm.
She goes to a school basically to become a pilot.
Space pilot.
Yeah, they live in space and they're space pilots, so it's not like a typical pilot. But I like this because you get like the class and you get like the little rivals and friend kind of dramas with going to school, like a high school.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's like high stakes and there's a war going on and lots of mysteries, things that you're trying to figure out. Like, wait, what is actually going on here? And she has Mbot, and Mbot is just one of my favorites. It's her.
Mbot is fun. It's her artificial intelligence friend.
BFF.
That is a very fun character. You know, interestingly, I almost grabbed Steelheart,
Yeah.
which is one of Brandon Sanderson's other YA fantasy series. So I think maybe just his YA stuff. And fascinatingly, I would also argue that Alcatraz and the Evil Librarians is an underrated series. So I think Sanderson is getting a reputation for being a really good fantasy writer. I think maybe what people don't realize is his YA stuff is really, really good. And really, really interesting and really accessible for many readers. Like this, we started reading with my son, who's 8, right? So it's really within age range of many more readers than I think his fantasy stuff is.
My 8-year-old kind of died on me. That's why it's back on that shelf.
Yeah.
I think some of the humor was just over his head.
Yes.
Where I'm like giggling and he's like, I don't get it. So
yep.
Maybe like another year he would love it.
Yeah, I think other 8-year-olds may be able to do it. Like I don't think the vocabulary or any of those things would get there. I think he just made up his mind he wasn't interested in this book before we even started.
I think he did too. Something about being not forced.
Forced to read.
Heavily
turns
persuaded.
Out the books that your dad forces you to read are just not the coolest. I guess is how it turns out. Well,
I definitely recommend Skyward though. Definitely, all ages.
Here's my last one. This is Lies of Loch Lamora, right? So this is the Gentleman Bastard series, a phenomenal, phenomenal series, phenomenal fantasy, fits incredibly well with any of those aforementioned fantasy writers that we talked about. If Lightbringer belongs in that fantasy area, this belongs kind of in that upper echelon of them. I really, really love what Scott Lynch has been able to do here with the characters. And the flashbacks and the way that he does that are just really, really good, really strong writing throughout. I wouldn't say that it really ebbs and flows very much. It's fairly like a steady burn. It also doesn't necessarily waterfall as fast as you would think that other books do. But it just is compelling. The world is interesting. The characters are interesting. There's real stakes here. There's real pain here. It's a phenomenal book that I just don't hear many talk about. Now, I do hear a few that just love it, and it seems to be those that have read it really enjoy it and try to share it.
I feel like I've heard, of your 3, I've heard of this one the most.
Yes, but it still is, this is not anywhere near kind of I'm going to say a lay person's radar when it comes to fantasy.
Yeah.
Right? If you're a big fantasy reader, there's a good chance you've picked this up or are in that world. If you are just getting into fantasy, there's a good chance you've never heard of this series, and it should be high on the list of ones you hear of. Very, very high. Because I think if you like Stormlight, if you liked Wheel of Time, if you like Lord of the Rings, if you like any of those type of things, there's a good chance you're going to like this. And if you don't like some of those, you still may like this. It's that good of a series.
I'm excited for that one.
Yeah. Read me.
I know.
Anyways.
Well, I will.
It's underappreciated in our own household, what can I say?
I'll get there. I don't own my next one. I want to own it.
So underappreciated.
Yeah. By me, I suppose. What the Wind Knows. What the Wind Knows.
Okay.
By Amy Harmon. I think it has the potential to be way more appreciated just because of the similarities between that and Outlander. Her grandpa just died, and she's really into like history and family history and like her heritage basically. So when her grandpa dies, he's like, "You got to take my ashes back to Ireland." And so in Ireland, she ends up time traveling back to anyway. It's
naturally.
Yep. It is just so good, and I still think my heart hurts just a little bit from reading that book, like in a good way. It's so cute, so cute. Definitely recommend it, and I'm just not hearing a lot about it. I feel like the only time I hear about it is like in the same group. We talk about it often, but nowhere else have I heard people talking about this book.
Well,
it's a good one.
This has been our favorite, our most underappreciated books that we own or don't own, I suppose.
Have read.
I'm curious what books you feel like are underappreciated. Leave a like and mention them in the comments. We'd be happy to pick them up and read them ourselves and decide if that is actually something underappreciated or you just have really bad taste.
You're so mean, and that's harsh. We won't do that. But we probably will read it because we read a lot and we love recommendations.
We do. I'm Blake.
I'm Jamie.
We're Blamie.
I guess so.
See you later.
Goodbye.